naninira sa malakas na dating ng balak tumakbong presidenteng si Bongbong Marcos. Marami na po ang naninira kay Bongbong Marcos sa social media, ah, sa TikTok, sa Instagram, sa Twitter.
The machine started beeping, and then all the nurses came in, all the doctors came in. We were hustled out of the room, and that was it. So there were no last words, but
There was that last look.
there was that last look that I will never forget. And God, look what you're doing to me. People will think I'm a crybaby.
It meant the world, that last look.
It's a very, very sad memory. And sad and happy at the same time, because at least meron siyang last na connection with me, with us. I could see he really looked, and he knew who I was, and he knew that perhaps he was going.
Parang
So,
that look was a farewell.
parang ganon.
A lot of people were saying that your father, Ferdinand Marcos, was the best president the Philippines has ever had. And to some people, he was the worst president the
Sure.
Philippines has ever had. But if I were to ask you, what's the best and worst thing about him?
The best thing about him as a leader, as a president, he was an actual leader. I think the problem now we have is that we lack leadership. You cannot be president following surveys, which is a tendency that we have not only here but in other countries as well. Meron siyang vision talaga. I want the Philippines to be this place in 10 years. I will make the Philippines this good by that year. Meron siyang vision. Ano yung galing ng Pinoy? Yun, doon tayo. Pagandahin natin, tulad niya. He had a very clear understanding of what needed to be done and how to do it. And that, I think, was his best quality as a leader, which was born of his experience, born of his smarts, born of his love for the Filipinos and Philippines. The worst, I don't know how you would describe, because he had all the qualities of a good leader that a good leader would have, should have rather. He took any job that he had very, very, very serious. A very serious person. And that sense of focus, maybe that's the worst, because everything was put aside. If it does not help the presidency, it does not help the country. If it is not in the national interest, you keep it to yourself, because I don't have time for that. That's all I have to do. Not to say that he was a negligent father, but he was always very doting with us. But that was his life. That was everything that he was about. Worst in the sense, kasi kami, mga anak na, we wish we could spend more time with him, and so ano ba, we never see him anymore. Actually, my mom, the same thing. They were always out doing something, even when we'd come home from when we were going to school abroad already. Pag uwi namin, so umuwi pa tayo, we don't naman see our parents. But that was the kulang part in our, because they were just so busy. There was just so much to do and so many things to.
How do you handle po, Sir Bong, yung mga criticisms, yung mga bashers, yung mga hate, the anti-Marcos?
Well, we're in political life. Find me a person in political life who has no critic, who has no hater, who has no bashers, who has no critic. And you can't find one. Nobody won an election with 100% of the vote. No one, ever, anywhere, unless they cheated. So that's something that we learned to live with because I remember very well when he was Senate President. I remember being in Baguio for some reason, and every day the newspaper would be, oust Marcos, oust Marcos. Basta binabanatan siya ng husto. I'm talking young. I was quite young.
Ilang taon po kayo nun?
I must have been 6 old.
So at 6 pa lang,
Nababasa na ako eh. You could read already. So,
and you would get affected nung time na yun, syempre.
hindi ko maintindihan ba't galit sila sa daddy ko. Ba't galit na galit sila? Eh, siyempre, babasahin ko yung diary, hindi ko naman naintindihan kung ano yung pinag-uusapan nila. So, I remember asking an aunt, saying, ba't ganun? Ba't sila galit kay daddy? Bait naman si daddy. Hindi, ganyan
And
talaga.
to this day, Sir Bong,
Kaya nga,
the mere surname, merong mga talagang pag narinig Marcos. But your father po, how did he handle that? Yung mga Aus, Marcos, yung mga
wala.
credit.
Trabaho lang tatay ko, trabaho lang. That's nothing. I mean, I've been called worse names. I've been called every name in the book. Tawa siya na tawa. If you're making your enemies angry, you're doing a good job. And we go back to Churchill. If you haven't made any enemies, you haven't done anything. Ganyan talaga. Ang buhay ng politika eh. Wala ka talaga. Hindi mo maiwasan yun eh. Kahit yung pinaka-popular. Tignan mo, our president now, if you look at the surveys, ang taas-taas ng popularity, ng approval rating at lahat, meron pa rin galit sa kanya, meron pang minumura siya, meron pang kung ano-ano sinasabi. Hindi mo mawala yan eh. And we learned that lesson I did anyway, I learned that lesson very early on.
At the age of 6.
Mga ganun. I remember, we'll look in the history books. When was the time when he was Senate President, ang gusto talaga siyang tanggalin. They just kept attacking him and attacking him. I remembered, I still in my head, I can still see the newspaper. Oust Marcos. Marcos out. Yung ganun, puro ganun yung headline.
At the age of 6, ano? Parang ang aga kagad na awakening yun and realization about life. Di ba?
It had to happen because buhay talaga namin yun. It's been that way since
history.
Before we were born.
Yes.
Di ba?
Speaking of history, Sir Bong, if you were to change one thing about the Philippine history, what would you change?
The colonizations, sana hindi na tayo na-colonize. I would do away with the Spanish colonization, with the 300 years. And all the Americans essentially colonized us too. And I think that Filipinos deserve better than to be second-class citizens.
Your mom has been very vocal about you following the footsteps of your father, hindi ba? So, where do you see yourself next year?
As long as I'm functioning, I consider myself to be in public service. I hew close to my father's idea that it seems we were put on this earth to serve, and so that's what I'll do. If that is my purpose in life and that's what God wants for me to do, then that's what I will continue to do. Hanggat I'm functioning. It's never finished kasi. It's never finished. There's always one other thing that you can do. There's always a little bit more that you can do.
So if it's not yet finished, what is it po that you want to continue doing?
Helping, just make the Philippines better. Well, right now, to be specific, is we're in the middle of this crisis. We have to improve our vaccination rollout para talagang, because it seems to be the only solution. In the very beginning of the pandemic, I was trying to find a way that you could balance opening the economy and staying safe. With the vaccines coming, what really needs to be done now is to have a plan for the re-emerging Philippine economy. What do we do? Paano natin bubuhayin ulit yung mga nalugi?
In the eyes of public, you have lived a privileged life. And parang iniisip nila, you seem to have everything. If there's one thing that you think that you don't have, ano po yun?
I agree with that public perception. Well, in the earlier part of my life, the privileges we enjoyed, we grew up in comfort. We had never needed for anything. What is it that's kulang pa in my...
You think that you don't have because you seem to have everything.
I'm jealous of you. I wanted to be a musician.
Sabi nga po ng anak nyo, if you weren't in politics, rockstar nga daw po kayo.
Ay, yun. Dalawa lang ang ambisyon ko nung maliit. When I was about 12 years old, maging rockstar, maging astronaut.
Sino idol yung rockstar nun?
Stones, with Jagger, well, the Beatles, all of them. I became friends with all of them eventually.
Really?
Nakilala ko silang lahat. Siyempre, nakatunga ako. All this, ano.
If you were to introduce the name Marcos to the new generation, how would you introduce yourself to them?
Well, I'm the son of the longest lasting president who brought the Philippines into the modern world, really. And we became who brought to the Philippines a sense of nationhood. I've been asked many times, what's the most important part of your father's legacy? I'd say the most important part is that sense of nationhood. When we were proud to be Filipino, when we would go out abroad and say, Filipino kami. I think that was the first thing. And not a small part of that was OPM, was the original Pinoy music. Because it's the culture. You learn about, this is what it means to be a Pinoy. This is what it means to be Filipino. And that happened during his time. And if you ask me, despite all of the successes that he had, built all the roads, the schools, the educational system, the medical, that's all wonderful and something that we should continue to. It's that sense of nationhood. And we were united. We were united as one. We were all working in the same direction, And we've lost that a little bit. And that's what I would like to, that's how I would introduce myself. I would like to restore that. Nasa ugali naman ng Pilipino na matulungin eh. Nasa ugali natin yung bayanihan. Kailangan gisingin lang ulit eh. Kailangan magtulungan ulit tayo. Medyo nakikita natin during the pandemic, random acts of kindness.
Bayanihan.
And just because Pinoys are just great. I mean, Pinoys are the best. They're the kindest, most gracious, most masipag, most resourceful. We never give up. You know? Pag masyado nang mahira, gagawa ng joke. Saan ko naman nakakita ng gano'n? Hirap na nagpapatawa pa.
Very resilient.
Tough. We're tough, not in that arrogant or aggressive way. We're tough in a very gentle Asian way. Which is for me the most remarkable quality that Filipinos have. We're the best. Pinoys are the best. You can't bring them anywhere, ask them to do anything, basta i-backupan mo, basta you support them, they'll do good. You cannot put a Pinoy down.
Yan.
They won't stop. They won't stop. Especially for the family.
So that's the best quality of a Pinoy. If I were to ask you naman po, what's your best quality?
My best quality? It's against my nature too.
But how are you po as a husband? How will you describe yourself
Me?
as a husband?
As a parent, as a husband, I think I'm pretty typical. That I mean, you're just trying to do your best. You're always trying to do your best. Of course, you never succeed. You don't succeed every time, but that's it. That's all you can do. That's a good question. How do I describe myself as a husband? I'm now trying to compare myself with friends of mine. I think at this stage in our family's life, it's really to be close to the family, as close to the family as you can. So even if you're working for something much bigger than just your family, that still remains the focus of your life. I'm many of the time I could retire and just give up. What will my kids think? Diba? Tinamad na yung tatay namin, ayaw na eh.
Speaking of tired, what are you tired hearing about?
Lies. I'm really tired of hearing lies that have already been disproven. Not necessarily about my family, about me. Some people have the idea that if you repeat a lie often enough, it becomes the truth. And so they keep repeating things. It's just tiresome. Pero yet, like I said, may pagkamanhid na rin ako. Kasi alam ko naman, ganyan naman talaga eh.
Malapit na po ang botohan. Ilang months na lang. January, February, March, April, or mga 4 or 7 to 8 months, magbobotohan na. Marami na ang naninira sa malakas na dating ng balak tumakbong presidenteng si Bongbong Marcos. Marami na po ang naninira kay Bongbong Marcos sa social media, sa TikTok, sa Instagram, sa Twitter, ewan ko lang sa YouTube, lalong-lalo na sa TikTok po. Marami na pong basher ang Bongbong Marcos. Marami ang galit na galit kay Bongbong Marcos. Marami ang nanggagalaiti kay Bongbong Marcos. Marami ang pumupuna kay Bongbong Marcos. At marami ang natatakot na tumakbo si Bongbong Marcos. Isa lang ang dahilan yan. Pinapakalat siya ng mga kalaban. Pinapakalat siya ng mga kalaban niya na babayaran para siraan ang isang magaling o isang magiging presidenteng magaling pag nanalo. Takot na takot sila, kaya todo ang paninira nila kasi alam nila desperado sila pag si Bongbong Marcos ang tumakbo. Kay Sara Duterte nga lang takot na takot sila, tapos tatapatan pa sila ni Bongbong Marcos. Saan na mapupulot yung mga ibang kandidato? Sa kangkungan, sigurado. Kaya nga todo na po ang paninira nila sa social media, lalong-lalo na sa TikTok. May mga TikTokers na hindi nila alam kung ano yung pinaglalaban nila. Nagpapaliwanag lang sila, pero yung laman na pinapaliwanag nila ay hindi ko maintindihan. Mga TikTokers na nababayaran. Meron nga ako napanood na TikTokers, teenager, na parang pilit ang magsalita. Meron ako napapanood sa TikTok na isang lalaki na parang galit na galit kay Marcos. Galit na galit sa mga Marcoses. Meron namang isang TikTokers na bakla na punong-puno ng filter ang kanyang channel, na ang pinopost is puro kababuyan o puro kabastusan, puro kamangmangan, puro walang kwenta ang pinopost. Dapat yung mga ganitong mga TikTok channel co-creator ang binaban sa TikTok dahil hindi nakarapat dapat sa TikTok, dahil puro kabastusan at paninira na walang katotohanan o walang basihan. Kahit ipaliwanag nila, wala naman silang alam. Hindi naman nila naabutan si Bongbong Marcos, hindi naman nila naabutan si Ferdinand Marcos naging presidente. Pero kung akala mo naman makapag-react, akala mo naman may pinaglalaban, o akala mo naman totoo yung mga sinasabi, di ba? Nakakawalang gana manood ngayon sa social media dahil puro na lang paninira sa magiging presidente ng Pilipinas na si Bongbong Marcos. Nakakaawa naman sila. Pansinin naman natin ang mga basher. Kaya dahil ano yan, kailangan nila ng pera. Kailangan nila ng pera at kailangan nilang kumita dahil pandemya nga. Kaya pinapatos nila at kumakapit sa patalim. Kahit na bayaran, papatulan na yan. Pero kahit po anong mangyari, pagdating ng batuhan, huwag po tayong basta-basta na lang magboboto nang hindi natin kilala. Iboto natin yung tamang kandidato. Dahil ang mga kandidato ngayon ay naglalabasan na. Pero nung panahon ng epidemya at panahon ng mga sakuna, nakatago. Ngayon, naglalabasan. Wala naman na itulong nung panahon ng sakuna at ng epidemya, kung hindi dumakdak, kung hindi pumuna sa gobyerno. Pero ngayon, dahil malapit na eleksyon, nagpapakalat na ng mga poster, nagpapakalat na ng mga posts, ng mga kasinungalingan sa TikTok, social media at kung saan-saan pa. Huwag po nating hayaan na manalo, o huwag po nating hayaan na sakupin tayo ng mga maling mga maling pinuno o mga pinuno na dinadaan tayo sa kabaitan. Huwag na huwag po tayong boboto sa mga NPA, sa mga puro pangako, sa mga disente, at sa mga nagbabayad ng libo-libong trolls para siraan ang kanilang mga kalaban. Iwas-iwas po tayo sa mga taong ganyan. Basta sa 2022, vote wisely, vote Bongbong Marcos or Sara Duterte para tuloy-tuloy po ang ating kasaganahan ng ating bansa. Umiwas sa dilaw, umiwas sa peke. Vote wisely sa 2022. Maraming salamat po.